So a couple of weeks ago, I was at an industry function, and because this is Seattle, I found myself in a conversation with this guy who had started a tech startup. I said, really, what does your company do? He says, we've created a machine learning algorithm that automates the migration of data models to hybrid cloud infrastructure. That right there is why startups need better storytelling. Not just to impress people at cocktail parties, although it's good for that, but if you started a company, you need customers to understand what exactly you're offering. You need investors to be psyched about writing you those giant checks. You need press and analysts to understand why they should go out and say cool things about your company. And you need young, talented people to come and work for you despite the low pay and appalling working conditions. The stories that get people psyched about doing those things are not stories about your company or your technology. They're stories about them. In more than 10 years, working with global startups all over the place, looking for those stories that combine the company, their audience, and the world, I found that there's basically 5 stories that companies can tell about themselves. They're not all created equal, and they're not mutually exclusive. They're more like a ladder. You start at the first rung, and the goal should be to climb as high on that ladder as you can. So here they are. First story is we've built a better mousetrap. This is a story of technical ingenuity, and to the engineers who start a lot of high-tech companies, this is the only story that they consider really worth telling. And the more precise, the better. That has certain virtues, but then you end up being that guy at the party. Which is why you need story number 2. We have taken something that is expensive or a hassle or not fun, and we have made it cheaper, more convenient, safer, bigger, better, faster, more. You're offering a benefit to somebody, and the value of what you're doing and the why of what you're doing is starting to come into focus. The problem is that it really depends on what exactly it is you're doing to get people to care about that. Which is why it's good to have story number 3. Our business is going to disrupt a market or industry. That is, the thing that we've identified is such a bottleneck that once we get rid of it, we're going to unlock all of this value. Nobody's going to do anything the same way again, and all of our competitors are going to look like they're in the buggy whip industry. If I'm a member of the trade press or an investor, I'm starting to get really interested in that story. If you want to really knock these folks out, then you tell them story number 4, which is we're going to change the way everybody does everything. We're going to fundamentally transform the transportation industry. We're going to change the way people do the hospitality industry and short-term rentals. You don't have to be Uber or Airbnb to be in that unicorn league. Almost every company that is doing something interesting with technology has transformative potential, and if you are not seeing it in your story, it means you're not looking hard enough. Now, I said there were 5 stories, and if that's number 4, what could be better than that? Well, story number 5 is our company is going to change the world for the better. That because of what we're doing, millions, maybe billions of people are going to lead better lives. Not every company has that story, especially when they start out. But in my opinion, every company should be striving to be able to tell that story someday. So how do all of these 5 stories fit together to make a startup something more than a technology, something more compelling? Well, let me tell you a story. A little bit of background. Did you know that in some parts of the world, when you go to get a prescription at a legitimate place, a hospital, a doctor's office, pharmacy, there's a 40% chance that that prescription is counterfeit? That means that in best case, maybe it's not going to work at all, and in worst case, it might be poisonous and might do you some harm. Are you going to trust that for yourself or your kids? This is an incredibly difficult problem to solve because it drives the pharmaceutical industry crazy for all kinds of reasons that should be obvious. It's terrible for individual patients, and it's really bad for governments because it means that they're failing in their basic job, which is to keep their citizens safe. But it's also a really tough problem to solve because no country can control everything that's coming in and out of its borders. And the countries that have the biggest problem with this are not really countries that always have effective or honest governments in the first place. In 2008, a young journalist in Ghana named Bright Simone was taking a look at this problem and trying to figure out what could be done about it. And one of the things he observed is that in Ghana, cell phone penetration over the previous 5 years had gone up to about 90%. And he thought, is there a way to connect these two unconnected trends and maybe find a solution to this problem that would also be a great company that made money? He started a company called M-Pedigree to do this, and he built a better mousetrap. Technically, how it works is all of the pharmaceutical companies keep the lot numbers of every container of drugs that they distribute in a centralized database, and they print a code on the package behind a scratch-off sticker. The consumer gets the medication, they scratch off the thing to make sure it hasn't been tampered with, they text their code to the service, and within 2 seconds, they get a response back to authenticate whether or not this is genuine prescription. Engineering-wise, no great shakes, although it takes a lot of back-end coordination to make it look that easy. Does this provide a benefit to consumers and patients? You better believe it. It instantly resolves doubt about the authenticity of something that could be a life or death decision. Does it disrupt an industry? Yes, actually this is a 3-for-1 special. It disrupts 3 industries. First of all, it helps out the pharmaceutical business by giving them a solution to a problem that they could not possibly have solved by any other way. It helps governments because it solves an enforcement problem without hiring a single other inspector or costing a penny of taxpayer money. And as a bonus, it helps the telco industries in a lot of these economies that are trying to run more traffic through their text messaging services because it's creating a demand for their service. And because of the way the system is set up, the pharma companies pay the telecoms to make it a free text message for consumers. Is this changing the way we look at a problem? Well, yes, because up until now, people had looked at this issue of counterfeiting and saw a law enforcement problem. Bright Simone saw an information problem. He figured if consumers could tell at the point of purchase whether a product was real or fake, they would choose the real one every single time. And he was right about that. Finally, did this product change the world? Well, as it rolled out across Africa, Middle East, and South Asia, incidents of prescription counterfeiting went from 40% and that level down to the single digits. The lives of millions, maybe billions of people were changed for the better because of this product and this idea. They didn't start off with a story that good. And I would remind you again, this is a commercial company. A few years ago, HP took a stake, and they're working with a lot of global partners. They also have a 10-year head start on using data and transparency to authenticate physical goods, intellectual property, and financial capital. If you've heard the word blockchain anytime in the last couple of months, you'll understand why that's not a bad place to be. They didn't start off with this story, but they kept this story in their heads and told it to themselves every single day until they made it true. They said they were going to change the world, and then they went out and did it. Wouldn't it be nice if the next startup that you run into at a cocktail party or at a pitch festival had a story that good?